Hi everyone, my name is Duco van Bremen and I'm the General Manager of Haymarket HQ. That's this place that you're in right now. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Haymarket HQ, we're Australia's first Asia innovation hub, connecting startups here to opportunities in Asia, but also helping more and more Asian companies grow into Australia. So obviously today's topic is very dear to our heart. Now, before I continue, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. A little bit of housekeeping. Over there on your right-hand side are the bathrooms. Drinks are in the back. Fire exits are right over there and in the rear of the co-working space as well. Now, just a quick note for those of you who hadn't seen the big two cameras here, this event is being live streamed, so please no funny questions. Now, I will leave the introduction of the event and a little bit of the context to the next speaker. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Peter Mackay, Director of International Trade at New South Wales Treasury. Peter.
Thank you very much, Duco. And I'd like to thank Haymarket HQ for inviting us to partner with you on this really important activity. I mean, it's such an evolving and frightening situation. I think none of us have the answers individually, but the idea of this, as the topic says, we're in it together. The idea is to get a whole bunch of people who are going to bring different perspectives to this and look at what kinds of solutions we can bring to play, because we're unsure how it's going to play out, we're unsure how long it's going to go for, and so on. Just a little bit of background about Study New South Wales. We were set up in 2014 by the New South Wales government, essentially with the responsibility of trying to support and enhance the international student experience. This situation is one that's clearly having a massive impact on the experience of international students, and in particular international students from China. The work of Study New South Wales is guided by an advisory board, and I just wanted to acknowledge Professor Barney Glover, the Vice-Chancellor of the Western Sydney University. Thank you very much, Barney, for taking time out. And I think the fact that we've got a Vice-Chancellor here, one of our top universities, demonstrates the importance that the sector places on trying to support our students through this. I'd also like to acknowledge Terry Hillsberg. Terry is also on the advisory board, and he provides that private sector advice and guidance as well, and is based down here at Haymarket HQ. So look, I hope today's informative for us. Most importantly, I hope we get some practical ideas that we can take forward. We are, as a state government, working very closely with our colleagues in other states and territories and with the federal government. I am on the task force set up by Minister Tian to look at how states and territories can work with the federal government in responding to this situation. So really interested to hear whatever ideas come from today. So thank you very much for being here, and I'll pass it back to Katie. Oh, so Katie from my team will talk a little bit about the work that we're doing here. So I'll pass over to you, Katie.
Hello everyone, my name's Katie Hanna. I'm the Senior Advisor Advocacy and Engagement at Study New South Wales, and it's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. If you'd like to share your experience from today, you can either tag Study New South Wales or Haymarket HQ on Twitter, or hashtag Study New South Wales on LinkedIn, or tag Haymarket HQ on LinkedIn as well. So I'm just going to give you a bit of a run through what the last 3 weeks have been like for our small but mighty Study New South Wales team. So as Peter mentioned, we are on the Global Reputation Task Force, which was convened by the Minister for Education, Dan Tian. And they're looking at 3 different stages of response. So obviously a rapid response, how we're supporting impacted international students in China and also here on shore. Looking at campaigns and messaging for our students, and then also looking at how we can refine and embed some new ways of working so we're a stronger sector and can respond strongly together in the future. Yesterday I was in Canberra with our state and territory colleagues, all the different study hubs from around the country and Austrade, working together under the International Education Marketing Forum. It was, for me on a personal level, comforting to know that we are all going through a very similar experience, be it New South Wales, South Australia, Perth. They're all kind of in the same situation, doing our best to support our offshore students and those that are onshore. So there's a bit of work happening in this space. Our first immediate campaign that we're looking at will be hashtag in this together. And we've got some film crew here today. So if you would like to capture a message for our impacted students, you can come and see me at 4 o'clock. We've got a video crew here. So if you did want to just jump on camera for 10 seconds, then we'll get a quick grab. And that'll just contribute to our positive messaging that we'll be sharing with our impacted students. We've been working really fast and hard within the New South Wales government, providing expert advice and advocating to our ministers and our Treasury colleagues on the impact of this situation. We've also been, as best as we can, amplifying and sharing information from the Commonwealth and New South Wales government. And also today we've quickly pulled together this event for our education providers to provide some immediate support and some creative ideas on how we can reach our students in China. We've also been still welcoming international students from from Sydney Airport. Each day we welcome dozens of newly arrived international students at Sydney Airport. So we've expanded the hours and we've engaged some paid staff to make sure that when students first land into Sydney, they've got a friendly welcome and a happy face to welcome them when they first land. We're working on, we've engaged a creative agency and we'll be working on some creative campaigns using the hashtag in this together to make sure that we're kind of reinforcing that we do care, we are here to support them and kind of watch this space for more to come. There's a lot happening within New South Wales. We've been working on the New South Wales Community and Resilience and Response Committee, which has representatives from New South Wales Health, New South Wales Police, Multicultural New South Wales. So I just wanted to reassure you that there are lots of different government agencies working across this space. And we'll be working on some more engagement strategies looking at the immediate, medium and long-term opportunities for us as a team, be it Study New South Wales and the community across New South Wales to support our impacted students that are here onshore, but also when the travel ban lifts, how are we going to work together to support those students when they do come through into Sydney and across New South Wales. On that note, I'll hand over to Terry. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Terry Hillsberg, and Duke, I forgot to mention that at 4 o'clock we are opening the bar and we will have some food as well. So please feel free to join us. And this session is going to be relatively short in order to allow you all to have a chat. Now, what we're going to do is divide this session into two panels where the panelists will also give their views as to what can and should be done. So the first panel will be about the experience of students and experience of providers in the current environment. And then the second panel will be about the particular technology options in the online environment. So I'd like to ask the first panel to come up here. And firstly, Professor Barney Glover, the Vice-Chancellor and President of Western Sydney University. Vivian Thun. Vivian Thun, who is the head of Golden Education in Australia, which is a Chinese-based financial services training organisation that has about 8,000 people in China and has a very rapidly growing business in Australia, mainly amongst Chinese students. And thirdly, Dave Galassi, wherever he is. Okay, so, and Dave's going to lead the discussion. And by way of background, David is, he went from Australia to China, 10 years ago, somewhere around like that. And out of Holhot in Inner Mongolia, he set up a chain of English language schools. And he then expanded that into early childhood education. But he's probably most famous for being probably one of the top 3 foreign key opinion leaders in China. And so his face is often seen on the Chinese social media. And so he's got a particular perspective from both the education side and the consumer marketing side. So I'm going to pass it over to David to start and with other 2 participants to give their contribution and lead a discussion.
Thank you, Terry. Okay, guys, welcome. Thank you for coming today. Thank you, guys. And look, I'm a very casual person. I'm very laid back. I grew up in Auburn. That always cracks a laugh, especially once you know that my parents own a whole bunch of kebab shops. And let's grab a chicken kebab right after this one, okay, guys? I'll be calling you for that, mate. And you, of course. And so, guys, look, we all know what's going on. All jokes aside, it's pretty serious. And we want to find out what everyone's doing with it, how we're going to deal with it. And at the same time, for me personally, it's affected me quite a lot, obviously. So just to give you a bit of background, I've got about 12 schools across China, about 800 employees, and they're all stuck at home. They can't go to work. Students are not allowed to go to school. Every province has its own law. The biggest ones hit are closer to Wuhan, and the ones even up north next to the Mongolian border are still affected. So the entire country is under lockdown. So what we've done is basically converted everything online. And as you can imagine, we've got a whole bunch of international schools now. So the kids, how do you convert a child? Do you have children? I've got kids. Can you imagine them having online classes? So the parents, obviously, not very happy with that, right? But it's not just them, it's the entire country. So the entire country's on lockdown. And so it's kind of a devastating thing for a lot of businesses. Thankfully, we've got a really good background. I have my social media, which helps bring in a lot of students who have nowhere to go. So, oh no, all the schools are shut down. Where can I receive my education? Where can I go to study? At least they get access. And I have been pushing a lot of Study New South Wales content online because I want them to know that Australia cares. A lot of, look, politics is politics, right? And then what Chinese people there are actually thinking is, oh, Australia doesn't want us. That's what they're thinking at the moment. And every day I'm trying to convey the message that that's not true. We want you back. We want you to come back and continue your studies. We want to have good dealings with you. My hat goes off to Professor. Amazing, giving away $1,500 per student to every international student in his university. That is just absolutely amazing, absolutely phenomenal. It's people like him that makes me be proud of being an Australian. You know what I mean? And just like what Australia is, that's what we're all about. We're all about giving. We don't just want to take, we want to give back. Oh, Australia's expensive, yes, but we give back, So the problem at the moment that I'm going through is people just don't know what to do. They don't understand what the universities are thinking. They don't understand what they're being offered. And, that aside, then you got the problem here locally, which is racism. Now, that is the worst thing that came out of this virus, beyond the virus, is that, oh no, I don't want to eat that because I'm afraid. That's not true. So I'm every day posting messages to people on TikTok and Douyin saying, go to eat Chinese food today. Go grab a bite, show me the receipt and I'll repost it. You know what I mean? Because there's nothing wrong with doing that. So what we have to do is we have to be sending out positive messages, as Professor Barney has been doing. We've got to continue that. And for me, my schools, as I said, they've shut down, but they're continuing, they're ongoing. And so later on in the panel, I'm going to be asking a few questions to these guys about how they're going to prevent that in the future. If something like this happens again, what's going to be done to get yourself ready from a university, from your business? You've got so many employees. So yeah, guys, again, later on, if you have any questions, please hit me up and be happy to answer them, okay? So yeah, I should have given an intro of myself, but it's not really that important at the moment, is it? I'm not here for myself. I'm here to portray a message. So if you guys want to know who I am later on, I'm happy to speak to you guys about that, okay? Thank you. Madam?
All right. Lady first, so I'll just start very briefly to talk about what our business is and what we have been going through with this coronavirus. But first of all, thank you Haymarket HQ for providing us this opportunity to present it. And we are actually a company located in Haymarket HQ. As Terry just mentioned, we are a very large company in China, but we started to expand to Australia in 2019. So in mid-2019, we came to Australia with just just myself, but now our team has grown up to 15 people. Okay, so this is how we are expanding our business. In terms of what we do, so in Golden Education, we provide professional trainings in regards to financial service. So we mainly focus or target on the university students, mainly from China, to help them to get certificates like CFA and ACCA. So these will be the certificates that will help them to get a better job in China or as well as in Australia, to help them to strengthen their expertise in terms of the finance and accounting stuff. So apart from the professional trainings we provide, we also give them job opportunities and internship opportunities. We have a lot of connections in China because we collaborate with 6,000 enterprise in China, and this is other service we provide. So at the moment, what we are going through a few things. So first of all, half of my employees are currently in China because of the tourist ban, so they cannot come back to Australia. So we have to adapt to a work from home module for them to keep working. This is also something we have never done in terms of the work environment in China, it's not as work friendly as it is here in Australia. So my employees, they haven't gone through this work from home schedule. So we have to kind of collaborate and to adapt to the new working environment. So in terms of the business itself, because the students are currently being holding back in China, one thing we notice is they are very anxious. So they don't know what is going on in Australia. They don't know what the next policy will be. The government has policy, but the policy is only for 2 weeks and then extended for another week and another week. So we can feel, so on the internet, on the social media platform, we have like the WeChat group for almost 20 groups with more than 400 to 500 students. So we connect them and then we give out the information to the students, because at the moment on the internet there are a lot of false informations and some information that's come from officials. So they cannot tell which are the correct ones. So this is what we are doing. So we try to calm the students a little bit down and to help them to understand what the right policies are. So this is the first thing. The second thing what we do is, because we provide financial trainings, so for our business, we have face-to-face and online courses, but at the moment, we are shifting a lot of courses to online courses, and we are opening up a lot of free courses to the students. So we help them to understand, because a lot of them, they will be studying business in Australia. So we help them while they are waiting in China to get started for their educations. We help them to understand what they will be facing at universities, what kind of majors they can choose from, what these majors will lead you to in the professional life they will be having in the future. So these are the online courses we are providing to the students for free. So the last thing I want to mention as how we adapt to this coronavirus is that because in China we collaborate with 400 universities to provide the courses. So we have our own online platform which can help the universities to use the platform to do the online course to the students. So we have our 2B business to collaborate with the university to give out our platform for free to the university to use. Our platform can help can do the online kind of live course to adapt more than 5,000 students at the same time, and then they can do interactions with the professors in a very good way. So these are a few things we are trying to do at the moment. Yeah, I'll pass on to Professor.
Thank you. Look, it's great to be here, so thank you to the fellow panel members. From a university perspective, I think everyone in this room knows that this is an extremely challenging time. It's been an extremely challenging time in Australia and New South Wales, bushfires and storms, and now the coronavirus and the implications that has here. But importantly, the impact it's having in China, and we've heard that from the other speakers. And we are, as a group of universities, I think every Australian university at the moment is responding to the circumstances that our students in China are facing in a variety of different ways. And I do give credit to the Australian higher education system for its response to what's unfolding. Different responses from different universities, and I think that's been an interesting characteristic. I know you mentioned our particular response overnight to the circumstances our students are in, but like most universities, we're reaching out to them very much on the individual level, picking up the comment a moment ago about ensuring that information flows quickly, accurately, reliably to students. The anxiety levels are very, very high. And we also have this extraordinary scale with over 100,000 students, Chinese students waiting to come to Australia, and so many of them waiting to come into higher education in particular. And from that perspective, that creates its own challenge. I know other people will talk about online delivery. Western Sydney University, we have an online platform, but we're not equipped necessarily to deploy that internationally. So one of the challenges we've faced is how do we take our online systems we have now, our Zoom technology, for example, that we use, our learning management systems, and make them available in China through the firewall, and that's quite possible. I know the Chinese government is being supportive in that way, but that doesn't create a learning experience that students in China are used to. So that's quite challenging. So we're trying to do very similar things to what you're talking about, providing conversational English programs for students while they're in China waiting so that we can help to improve their conversational English for when they arrive. And of course, individualized study plans. But at the moment, the third country transit option is becoming very important, has been actually for some time. There are several thousand students in various countries, Thailand and Malaysia and the Middle East, waiting to transit to spend 14 days and then come into Australia. And I think we'll be seeing the beginning of that flow quite soon. And I think recent events have added some momentum to that. I think it's a very legitimate way for students to find their way to Australia and for us to be supportive of them in that journey. They'll still be arriving late into semester. So that's one of those challenges of the timing of the coronavirus outbreak in the context of Australian higher education beginning at this time of the year. North America, Europe, of course, on a different semester schedule means that students have options to go to the UK and Canada in particular later in the year. So this is challenging for Australian higher education. So not only do we need the individualised support that we'll be giving and other universities are giving, but when students arrive, as they will over the next few weeks, to provide additional support when they're here, to make up for that disrupted beginning to the semester, to provide additional programs, additional support. There's clinical issues and students going into clinical programs. We have to accommodate students who have laboratory requirements and other things. You can't do that online. We need to work through all of that. We're planning that over the course of the next, over the course of this semester and into the middle of the year. And we are reinforcing to our students the programs and support that's available. But it's a very, very difficult time. I think one of the most extraordinary things about international education in Australia is the number of people over so long, young people, who make this extraordinary decision to say, well, I'm going to go halfway across the world and study in another country, in a different language, to further my career and my life. That's an extraordinary decision to make. And we have an obligation as Australian universities to recognise that great commitment, that sacrifice in many cases. And when circumstances like this arise, how can we step in to provide as much support and assistance as possible to alleviate the tensions? And in this context, I'm very, very proud of the Australian higher education system. There is a great deal I could talk about. Study New South Wales is doing a great job, and I commend Peter and the team. A number of initiatives that are being put in place. We heard from Katie some of those a moment ago. Others being planned when we see the arrival numbers pick up in the next few weeks. So the virtual and the real support packages that can be provided to assist students. There are enormously important conversations going on between universities and the state government, universities and the federal government about how we can ensure we are as supportive as we can be to our students, that we have the resources available to support them in the short and the long term, and also how we can be resilient in the future. It's not the only time we're going to see a pandemic, an infectious disease outbreak. There are many other reasons that students will be stranded or isolated in the future. We need to be able to respond very, very effectively. I know David wants to pick that topic up in a moment, but I know that's part of the conversation we're having with governments. I am concerned about community response. To a large extent, that's going to be something we'll watch very carefully. We have a zero tolerance for racism on our campuses, as all Australian universities do. We'll respond quickly to those circumstances if and when they arise, and we hope they don't, but we need to be prepared for that possibility, and we'll respond to it. And we need to be reaching out to the Chinese community more broadly, not just those students in China, as important as they are at the moment, but all of our Chinese friends in Australia. Make sure that we are attending functions, involved in going to Chinese restaurants, all the things we need to do and we should do to reinforce the importance of that relationship.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, madam. Okay, guys, so we touched on a few points. The next thing I want to talk about is, Professor mentioned I was going to talk about that. What happens in the future? We know it's already happened now. We're working with it now. We're trying to go through the process of communicating with students, with people, with local communities and whatnot. But what about the future? So what I want to ask, I want to point my question to Vivian. So Vivian, you've seen it, in your company, you've seen this happen now. It's affected you guys. Have you got plans in the future to do something or to prepare something inside your company internally to have some kind of a prevention? You can't prevent the issue from happening, but you can internally, you can structure your company in a way where, you know what I mean? So can you elaborate, please? There you go. My one's better.
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. So I think I touched upon that for a little bit just previously, but I want to strengthen that point as, so the way we work, we are changing it. And I think it's not just our company that is making this change. So because of this coronavirus, a lot of companies in China, they are changing the way they work. So we are, and I think it actually brings up or booms up an industry, which is the online kind of the providers for the enterprise tools. So for example, WeChat and also Ali, they are doing a lot of platforms, and they're giving a lot of tools for the companies to use. So we can do a conference meeting for up to 200 people as a video conference meeting. So this is actually something the technology companies are doing. And these tools will provide enterprise and opportunities to engage with our employees in future cases where people are quarantined or cannot come back to work to have a better efficiency in terms of work environment. Yeah, so I think that's something, I think that's actually an industry that's very booming up at the moment in China. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Professor Barney, I'd like to ask you a question about the reach to your students. Vivian has access via WeChat to thousands of students, so great, really great work on that. But how does the university, while the students are in China at the moment, how do you then portray your messages to them? How do they receive it? Are you having issues with the firewall at the moment? Can you elaborate on that, please, Professor?
Look, I think WeChat is a great social media platform. I know it's different to other sorts of social media platforms, but I'm on WeChat, and we have a large number of our staff on WeChat. I think it's true for most universities. So we use that as a mechanism for communicating. That is alongside email, but it's very much the mode of communication, particularly at the moment for getting out short video messages, which are really important. To have, for example, the Minister for Higher Education here in New South Wales, Jeff Lee. Jeff very quickly put out a video subtitled in Mandarin. That was a way of giving the message from the New South Wales government. I'm sure other messages like that will emerge. I know it's happened federally. And I know I've put messages out there, and so have all of our staff. We have what are called Associate Deans International. They're Chinese Mandarin-speaking staff, and they've been doing short videos and pushing them out to our students. So using a platform like WeChat is vitally important. It comes into its own. It's a very versatile communication platform to get to groups of students and to quickly see the message. I mean, just as you and I were talking, I know how strongly you're represented across those platforms, but how quickly you can actually get a message out there. The problem sometimes is this real? Is this a real piece of information? How can we validate it? And then to go to trusted sources of information. So that remains an issue. So reach very much through WeChat, and at the moment that's the mechanism that we're getting out there across various modalities and getting great response and individually communicating. I think this is vital. It's a bit harder when a university like Sydney's got 18,000 students offshore or on their way onshore. But for many Australian universities, this is manageable. It's challenging, but it's manageable. We are trialling some technologies at the moment to test, to your question about the firewall. So we're finding we can certainly get through. Some content is problematic, so you've got to work through those sorts of issues. So some of our content's being replaced in order to still be viable in China. There are still bandwidth issues we're finding in China. So some of our students are not finding the connectivity strong enough at the moment for some of the platforms that we would want to be providing into the country. However, I know in the next session, open learning and other platforms are out there, and I think one of the next generation steps, we're all talking about being more resilient to circumstances like this. I know we as a university, we're a very large Australian university, we'll be investing in improving our capability, even though we're largely an on-campus university, but to ensure that we have the technology platforms that can be deployed to provide a range of experiences to students in various ways without degrading the on-campus aspect of that.
Thank you. That's a really good point made. But what I'd like to add on is you mentioned something about, not trusting where that information comes from, right? It's also access, because in China, what's happening is the Australian government's being posting through official social media channels. So Weibo, Douyin, I'm not sure about Douyin, but like TikTok. So basically what they're doing is they're using these platforms like Weibo to post videos from ministers that only have 30,000 fans. So the problem is access. Now, I have access to over 10 million. I'm happy to offer that to the New South Wales Australian government. That's yours. Now, everyone knows that. That is yours to use. Peter, it's yours, mate. Personal and work. But in all honesty, as an Australian, that's all I can do, isn't it? What else can I do from my point? I mean, giving you that panel to be able to express your message, send it out. So I would love to give access to that. So after this, hopefully we can have a chat and regulate some content, because they need information. They're not getting it. And so that's available to the Australian government anytime. Just knock on the door, have a kebab first. And if I like it, I'll have it ready. So just before we move on, I'd like to, can I open up now or later on? Anyone want to ask any questions to Professor Vivian or myself? Yes.
Look, I think that put aside the current circumstance, we have great Australian universities that have committed themselves to being predominantly online delivery or blended delivery, whether it's a Charles Sturt, a Southern Queensland, Central Queensland, Charles Darwin. There are many, and just about every Australian university has a reasonably significant amount of online delivery capability. So that's already here, and I think Australia leads the world. We have some great private providers. Adam will talk about open learning in a moment, so there's an example of one there coming out of the Australian higher education system. So the technologies are there. If you talk about international education at the moment and this context, innovation is when you don't have a travel ban. And at the moment, countries like the UK and Canada don't have travel bans, which means they are, I think, very active in the context of building their presence and their attractiveness in China. One of the challenges that we'll face in Australia is to, I think, rebuild trust and to rebuild our presence in China. So we need to be demonstrating in the challenging circumstances we have at the moment. If you talk about innovation, it's how we can be as supportive to students in these difficult circumstances, something we haven't faced before, on a scale we've never seen before. If we do this well, and I think we can do it well, Australia, I think will be in a good place into the future, and that's where we'll be innovative. And I must say, when I look at what's happening across the sector, there are some innovative approaches being put in place to try and, one, reach out to and deliver a quality product into China when we've never had to do it before for a period of time, and then to look at ways that we can support our students when they do arrive.
So, guys, I think we reached the time up. Yep.
I think both of you mentioned English conversation, and is that over WeChat, or how's it? And is that written or talking, or how's that taking place? I think both of you mentioned it.
Yeah, no, Vivian mentioned as well through your platform. Look, we'll be using video conferencing technology, so Zoom. So we have, at the moment, as you pointed out, David, the English language training in China is shut down largely because of the challenges. We recognise that our students who would normally have been here this week, last week, will be delayed. Some of them will be delayed, and we want to be able to provide them with a way to just continue to develop their English language skills. And so we'll be providing free conversational English and academic English programs, as you are doing, which is great, and other universities are doing. I think we all recognise that.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Could I invite Patrick and Adam? Where are you? Okay, so what we're going to now talk about is some of the technology solutions that people are starting to adopt, and I'll hand it over to a couple of providers in a minute, but I'll start off. My name is Terry Hillsberg. I'm a venture capitalist based out of Shenzhen in China, and I've been involved in the online education industry in China for 20 years. I set the first Australian university that went into online education up in the year 2000. And I should stress there have been Australian universities offering online programs in China since the year 2000. And interestingly enough, some of those programs took off when the SARS epidemic happened. Every time we have an epidemic in China, online education takes off and then sort of dies a bit, but it never goes back to where it was. But in particular, what's changing now, and I think will be quite dramatic after the current coronavirus is resolved, is the fact that the young people are all doing online education in their homes. And so, for instance, my company, we have investments in 7 online education providers in China, and we have 30 million monthly active users, and their use rates, when I looked at the stats this morning, their use rates are running at 5 times what they normally have been running up to now, even though we've got 30 million online monthly active users. So this, in my view, will change things. And other providers, such as Vivian and others, just tell me that the young people now starting to come through from China are starting to demand online courses. It's no longer you just want a face-to-face thing. It's starting to be demanded. So let's look then at some of the potential solutions. And I'm not saying this is a panacea, but some of the issues and solutions related to online delivery. On the 19th of this month, the Commonwealth Government put out a resource document about this very issue, and that's the QR code that you can scan. If you don't like QR codes, you can hit the URL. And this document was published on the 19th, namely on Wednesday, by the Australian Department of Education, and it's a very good resource document talking about the various issues associated with online delivery in China. And it then goes on to point to another resource, which is a list of all of the providers who may be able to help you solve any online delivery options, including the 2 organisations here today. But there are many others doing different things, and I'll just briefly talk about that. The sort of problems that might happen in the online space in China are set out in that Commonwealth Government document. But the first one is about the regulation of awards that have been done via online education. And there's some discussions underway about the relaxation of them. But at the moment, basically, you cannot do a higher education degree in full in China and have it recognised. But that's not our short-term problem. But then there are a whole bunch of performance issues related to online delivery. And how this forum came about was one of the largest private providers in Australia called me about 2 weeks ago and said, our technology does not work in China. We are having a problem in communicating with in our synchronous classes in China. What can be done about that? Hence, we put something like this together. And I'll come back to that in a minute. Then lastly, you've got the problem, the third problem, which is Barney alluded to, which is where some of your content is hosted on some of the sites that are forbidden in China. Not the university sites, but for instance, you use YouTube for video delivery, or you have links in simulations that go off to some library that is not allowed in China. So but the major one that I just briefly want to talk about is latency issues, because in the end, a lot of this comes back to latency issues. And in other words, the ability to get somebody in Australia engaged in synchronous delivery with people in China. And that is at the end most of the issues. Or where large video files are hosted in Australia or in Hong Kong or somewhere, but are not out in Ulaanbaatar, sorry, not Ulaanbaatar, out in Ho Hot in Inner Mongolia. The thing just takes too long to download, and there's just not enough edge servers in the system. So these are the sort of problems that our two colleagues will talk about. Okay, sorry. And the last point I want to make is that on that list of private providers who can assist people, you will find people with different approaches to providing a solution. And we're only talking about a couple of them today. But for instance, we have operators such as Torrens University offering to make available their facilities in China, which they have on the ground, offering to make that available to other providers, and we're in face-to-face or online mode. People can also do units at a university that can provide online courses in China, can get recognition at another university. We can also deal with provision of education technology infrastructure, such as Adam has, to get around the problem. And lastly, we can provide a networking environment which can perform well across borders in the synchronous environment with low latency. And lastly, you can just redesign your course to get rid of anything that has a performance problem. But anyway, I'll stop now and ask our colleague from Alibaba Cloud, Patrick, to talk about the particular contribution you can make.
Sure, thank you. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Patrick from Alibaba Cloud. For those of you who don't know about us, we are the technology arm of the Alibaba Group. We're a public cloud infrastructure services provider and recently ranked number 3 in the world against the major providers. Today's discussion is really centered around what we're doing with educational institutions. The last 2 weeks, admittedly, has been very, very busy for us, all on the basis of the fact that as an organization with a good affiliation, obviously, to China, our intent is to try and help these students that are stranded. And I think by the government's last estimates, we're talking at least 115 to 120,000 that are currently impacted. And therefore, over the last 2 weeks, we've been engaged with a number of institutions from both Cordit, the Go8 Association, and other non-members to discuss our approach in helping them achieve what Terry's mentioned earlier. So the challenges that we're seeing at the moment really are coupled into 2 areas. And number one, obviously, you've got government policy, travel restrictions. Obviously, the ban is stopping these students from coming back. The biggest question for all of the universities, as I understood it, last week was how can they continue to provide a seamless experience in light of the fact that these students are important to them, there's going to be an impact to the economy, and really the fact that these students are very important to the entire ecosystem. Then you've got the issue of connectivity to China, which I think was mentioned earlier. How can you solve the network issues by ensuring that if you were to provide an online platform, these students are experiencing the best possible way of online education from the first time that they do it. And these two things culminate into what we're currently seeing at the moment. I read a report this morning about students obviously moving, going via Thailand and then coming back to Australia. There's a lot of angst with these students who don't know what their future is going to be. And alternatively, I think the impact to the local economy is that you even have some students considering alternative options elsewhere because of what's happening with the current government policies that we have. So what we've done in the last 2 weeks is we've essentially mobilized a solution very, very quickly that enables what we refer to as a site-to-site VPN, enabling students to access the internet as if they would when they are on campus. Now, the intent here is, as Terry mentioned earlier, to minimize the level of latency, so no lag, no delay in seconds when you're interacting with coursework. You might be downloading documents, you might be doing exams, you might be streaming media. The goal here is to make sure that you or a student in China is accessing this very, very seamlessly. And the tests that we have been able to conduct to date have proven that. We have extensive tests with all of the major universities presenting our ability to deliver that in that capacity. And it's done so because of the fact that Alibaba Cloud, as a global infrastructure services provider, we maintain a very, very large presence in China. We have agreements with all the telcos, and we have the ability to essentially direct traffic in and out of Hong Kong into China and back in compliance with all of the regulations and requirements in the PRC. So what's happened is we've also worked with a number of local, let's say, security providers to be able to ensure that the data being transmitted is kept secure. And we maintain the fact that as an international organization or international subsidiary of Alibaba, we operate within the realms of the compliance and regulations within Australia. Now, the biggest benefits to the students, again, very simple. It's probably easier said than how we do it, but essentially, the students are accessing their platforms as if they were on campus. They can access whatever website they need to, obviously in conjunction with disclaimers and notifications or whitelists that we're working with the universities to provision. We're making sure that there's minimal disruption, obviously to minimize the level of angst and, in this particular situation, make sure that the students feel comfortable with what they're doing. But I think more importantly, our ability to deal with, for example, 300 students versus 10 or 20,000 students at scale is absolutely something that we can do and something that we've been able to mobilize within 24 to 48 hours. Now, this diagram I won't go into, but all I'm really trying to demonstrate with this is the fact that Alibaba Cloud has proven this solution at scale. Again, we can move very quickly and mobilize a solution to deal with however many students are being impacted. Primarily, the conversations we've had to date have been with tertiary and some secondary institutions, but it can apply to anywhere, right? It really comes down to, I think, the biggest focus for one of the major universities was, how do I make sure that my students, from the very first time that they interact with this, have a good user experience? And what you don't want when you deliver this is the backlash to say, well, it doesn't work, I'm just going to defer my studies and wait until next semester. Alibaba Cloud has been well positioned to do that, and we've proven it not just in this particular instance, but over the last 12 months, given that we've actually seeded this technology elsewhere, and we've built it in such a way where Cordit, Go8, and a number of other bodies have come through to us for that type of help. So I think to summarize this, we're here to help. We're here to make sure that students are obviously taken care of. We're here to enhance and deliver what the universities are currently doing for their students. But more importantly, we're trying to make it easy. It's a situation where it's unfortunate, but we do have the technology to do that. So that's us from Alibaba Cloud.
Thanks, Terry. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you today. Okay, so Open Learning is a global platform that partners with universities and higher education providers to design and deliver world-class education. So our focus is really around ensuring that the quality of education that you deliver online is as good or better than what would be delivered face-to-face. Now, that is quite a challenge to do. Most online courses, most online education around the world, most platforms that are in use are still very traditional. So when we talk about today, actually looking at giving students in China or anywhere in the world access to online courses from the university, there's this inherent assumption that those courses are really good quality. Because if they're not, we could actually damage our brand more than we gain from giving them access to it. Because many courses around the world, either here or in any other countries, are still designed in a very traditional way, in the sense that they're a collection of videos and quizzes and PowerPoint documents that students are downloading and accessing. Now, that's what we would consider supplementary material to the course. That's not the real course experience. So our focus at Open Learning is providing the technology, the platform, the approach to learning design. So how do you design and deliver great courses? And how do you market and promote those courses so that you're actually delivering the best quality education possible? And we work with universities and colleges to take them on that journey, starting off from the very basic content that they might have, whether they're teaching a class 100% face-to-face or 30% face-to-face, and taking them on that journey to when they're delivering a really high-quality blended online learning experience that combines everything from project work, collaboration, problem-solving activities, and a complete student experience. So since we started the company in 2012, we've had about 1.7 million students around the world enroll in courses and use Open Learning. That includes about 7,900 courses globally. The majority of our learners are outside Australia, so only about 15% or a couple 100,000 are actually inside Australia. We've partnered with 62 education providers, including nine universities in Australia, and we have about 45 staff worldwide. Our head office is in Sydney with about 25 staff, and then we have a team in Malaysia focusing on the Southeast Asian market. And in China, we have about 10,000 students who use the platform. And as Terry mentioned, we listed on the Australian Stock Exchange in December last year. So you can actually follow us very closely under our ticker OLO. So Open Learning has partnered with a range of education providers across Australia, Malaysia, Southeast Asia, and around the world. Everyone from Western Sydney University through to UNSW, Macquarie, and many others. We've also partnered with professional organizations, so delivering professional development, a whole range of short courses, both accredited and unaccredited, and working with government departments as well. So Open Learning's approach is looking at the design of the course and making sure that design meets the needs of the learner. So when we look at delivering courses that are either entirely online or we're looking at reaching people through their mobile devices, we actually look at, as Terry mentioned at the very beginning, redesigning the course so that it actually can be used in an asynchronous way, but deliver a much more engaging experience to the learner. So rather than relying on the teacher or the facilitator to drive engagement and to teach every student, because if you have a face-to-face class, or even if you have like a traditional online course, you're relying on that teacher, that facilitator, to know exactly where every student is at, to try and tutor that student effectively, to get them to meet the outcomes. But the approach that Open Learning takes is one based around a theory in education called social constructivism. So the idea that students learn best when they're actively learning, when they construct knowledge, when they work in teams, when they get to know each other. So what that really looks like is when you do a course on Open Learning, you're actually going through a range of activities, learning activities, that include projects, case studies, scenarios, discussion, reflection, building up your portfolio of learning, and all of that is designed into the course. So effectively, you spend a lot more effort up front designing and building the course, but there's less effort in facilitation, and the experience is consistent. But the added benefit of this is because we're actually relying on the activities and the projects and the discussions, it's a much lower bandwidth approach. It doesn't rely on having streaming video or a lot of videos at all. In fact, we see that as largely detrimental to a high-quality learning experience because you want students to be active rather than passive when they're learning. So what we look at in the situation we're facing today is really a few ways of solving the challenges that we're faced with. Now, in the short term, there's all sorts of solutions that we can come up with involving logistics or VPNs and things like that. And those are all really necessary at the moment. But what we're looking at is some of the medium and longer term solutions as well. So this includes delivering undergraduate and postgraduate courses online, but redesigning them into this style so that the quality is consistent or better than what we could do face-to-face. We're also looking at ways of working with universities to diversify their revenue streams. So at the moment, universities have a very large number of international students, particularly students from mainland China. Now, that's fantastic that Australian universities are very popular around the world, but we have to look at bringing students in and educating them entirely online in other markets around the world. And open learning, through our presence across Southeast Asia and other markets, we're very well placed to partner with universities to actually help them reach students in new markets that might not be very large at the moment. And that feeds into looking at ways of diversifying the number of international students. But in terms of generating revenue, at the moment, universities and providers are typically focused on award programs, bachelor's degrees, master's programs, diplomas. Open Learning also looks at ways you can generate revenue through short courses and professional development and micro-credentials. And we see this as some of the largest growth areas in the market, where working professionals around the world want to learn new skills. On top of that, we look at ways of securing the pipeline of international students. And to us, this means looking at moving things like foundation programs and preparatory programs, English courses entirely online. So students don't have to come to Australia for the entire experience. Now, although we're very focused on, obviously, the students who can't come to Australia today, this is actually going to have a very significant medium-term impact on education providers, because English exams are delayed, the results will be delayed, students will miss the cutoff period for enrolling in next year, students can't make it to foundation programs, so this will all impact us for the next few years. And the last thing that we look at is, how do you foster a really positive community of students, whether it's here in Australia or around the world? How do you build the university's brand so that you're really reaching out, you're connecting with people, and you're educating them, in some cases for free or for a small amount? So that's really our focus at Open Learning, and we're really excited to work with a whole range of education providers to help them sort of meet the needs that they face today.
I just wanted to flag a series of local and state government grants that are becoming available. City of Sydney are opening their range of business and community grants, which close, I believe, in early March. So there's lots of different grants available, be it business, community, cultural, environmental, festivals, and dollar for dollar grants. So if you're interested in working with City of Sydney, perhaps to engage impacted Chinese students, this is a great opportunity. We're also opening up the Study New South Wales partner projects next week. So we'll have $300,000 of funding available for projects starting in July this year. So again, a great opportunity for you to partner with local and state government to run some proactive engagement activities and support our impacted students. Please stay connected. We've got our videography crew here, so if you'd like to come and jump on camera for 10 seconds and just get our message to our impacted Chinese students, I believe Nick and the crew are at the back there. We've got some signs with hashtagging this together, so we'd love to get you on camera. Please stay in touch, and if you have any feedback for us, the Study New South Wales team and Haymarket HQ team are available as well. So thank you.